Good afternoon. It's a great day to be in Marshfield today. Welcome to the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee for Tuesday, June 20th, 2023. Any potential conflicts of interest that anyone wants to claim? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 3, citizens' comments. Anybody want to talk? Citizens' comments, moving on. 4, consent agenda, minutes of the June 6, 2023 meeting, bills and payroll. It's your pleasure. I have a motion by Ed. Have a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Seeing none. Consideration of items, we're going to skip over number 5 because there wasn't anything removed. Number 6, request to recommend council approval of an agreement for Wisconsin Hazardous Materials Response System Service presented by Chief Fletty. Chief Fletty, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. In your packet, you'll find a copy of the contract between the City of Marshfield and the State of Wisconsin to provide a Type 3 hazardous materials response team for Wood County. We are a joint team with Wisconsin Rapids. This contract expires every 2 years, so get used to seeing my face, I guess, over the next several years here. And it does expire on June 30th. I did put the language in front of Attorney Wolfgram to see if there were any discrepancies. I reviewed the contract as well, just compared it side by side, and it didn't seem like there was a lot of language changes from the past few contracts. So he did clear that and had no recommendations for any changes. What this contract does is, obviously, we supply the Type 3 hazmat team for Wood County. In return, we get about $16,600 for equipment and training every year to keep our people up to speed on hazmat and get our equipment replenished. So I guess if there aren't any questions, I request to recommend approval to council. But happy to entertain any questions.
All right. Are there any questions? Okay, we're gonna, I'm surprised. Okay.
Me too.
You too, eh? What's your pleasure? Okay, so we have a motion by Natasha, second by Andrew. Okay, sure. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, like sign. Seeing none. Well, that was easy, Chief Fletty.
Way too easy.
It was such a long, it was so many documents. I thought it was going to be a lot longer than that. So.
I'll take it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Number 7, request to recommend council approval of an extension to the current agreement for planning services with SEH Incorporated for the period from July 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2023, presented by Sarah Dressel, Human Resources Director. Sarah.
Good evening, everyone. So this is a request for an extension of the current agreement that we have for planning services with SEH. Bryce Hembrook is the previous employee from Development Services who would continue to be the staff working with us from SEH. One change to note that is on the memo is that the cost per hour would increase from $135 per hour to $140 per hour. The change order that is referenced in the memo is attached in the packet as well for review. Additionally, at this time, just want to note that if we do fill any position that would basically take over or cover the duties that Bryce has been doing for us, we do have no obligation to continue with the services with SEH, just as we have discussed before. So with that, I would recommend that the committee recommend council approval to authorize the city administrator to execute the proposed extension for the period from July 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2023.
Thank you, Sarah. Mm-hmm. Andrew.
I do have a question here, and it's probably mainly out of ignorance, so I apologize. But why is it just an extension for a number of months as opposed to like a year-long extension?
Jennifer, do you know the answer to that?
I believe it's just hopes that we hire a staff member. I'm not even sure if the position is posted, though. Mm-hmm. Other than that.
Perfect. Good enough for me. Thank you.
Is there anything further? Ed?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't have any objection to the form of the change order, and I know why they're doing it. Because we don't have a planner on staff. We don't even have anybody in the pipeline. I don't think we're even advertising for a person to do this now.
Mhm.
I think my assumption is that administration is waiting until the change in the organizational chart takes place before they advertise any of these. Is that correct?
We did, I believe, about a month ago, we did advertise for the city planner position. We had requested some approval for that and did receive it and then did post it. With that, we received 2 applicants and neither were viable applicants for the position. So we did close it with the intention then of waiting until we had discussions further about the overall organizational chart for development services.
Well, now you've just awakened my curiosity.
Mhm.
How they're not, could you explain to me what not viable means?
They just didn't have the qualifications that we are requesting for the position.
How many years of experience are we requesting? Do you know right offhand?
I don't have it in front of me, to be honest with you, but based on the qualifications that were in our job description, they weren't qualified candidates.
More to the point of the change order. They say that the city planner, zoning administrator will typically dedicate 9 to 12 hours a week toward office hours. And then it gives the billing rate. It went up from 140, when it went up $5 from 135 to 140 bucks an hour. But here's the thing, what I'm hearing is that we are having quite a backlog with those zoning question type of things that should go to the Plan Commission. Has any thought been given to increasing the number of hours? I mean, is this a contractually dedicated thing where we can't spend any more than 12 hours a week? Is that it? And if that's the case, why aren't we increasing that to get rid of the backlog that we're experiencing?
Those are excellent questions that I myself don't have an answer for, but I can get that for you. Unfortunately, I think that would typically Steve has been.
Are you aware that there's a backlog? I mean, that's a question.
I know that there is definitely a workload there for sure.
I pass.
Go ahead, Natasha.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm just wondering if maybe, to Mr. Reigel's point, maybe we should extend this contract all the way through the end of the year. Would that just help you not have to bring it back to us and just make it easier?
I think what we'd probably need to just, what I would need to better understand is if this is at their request or if it's at our request, but it's certainly something that we can ask and see. Would that be the direction?
Well, we don't have a motion yet at this point. What is your pleasure? Go ahead, Natasha.
I move to send this to council for approval. Is that, or is it going to be in the consent?
Yeah. Do I have a second?
Yeah, second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to forward this on to council. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So there was 4 ayes, 1 no. All right. I'm losing track of my spot. Sorry about that. I believe we're on number 8. Review possible changes to the organizational chart, particularly related to the Development Services Department, also presented by Sarah Dressel.
Thank you. So the following presentation is regarding the organizational chart committee updates that were previously discussed at several common council meetings, with the direction given to return to the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee for further review and recommendations. So to provide a little bit of background, just in case others don't have the background, the Organizational Chart Committee was created by Common Council with the first meeting starting in January of 2023. So So council members on the committee included Alderpersons Ed Wagner, Tom Witzel, and Nick Peschel, as well as the mayor. Several staff also participated, including Justin Casperson from Parks and Recreation, Tom Lokes from Communications, myself from HR, and Jessica Schifferl from Clerk. After several meetings, Alderperson Witzel presented to Common Council a presentation wrap-up of information from that committee. Following the presentation, Alderperson Wagner motioned for further discussions and decisions to be completed by the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, which at that time was approved. So the first point of focus the committee discussed was the overall amount of direct reports that the city administrator currently has. Listed here are the current direct reports, including the Development Services Director, which is vacant, and the Assessor position, which is currently a contracted position. So that in total is 9 direct reports. So this slide illustrates the current state in April, not including any departments that report to a board or commission, such as the fire department, police department, and library. Besides the vacant director position in development services, there are also 2 other vacant positions, including city planner and associate planner. The committee members researched and requested organizational charts from other municipalities and asked for creativity from the group in designing other potential reporting structures. So some ideas included moving direct reports under other departments. Other ideas included creating a position that would be an assistant city administrator or an assistant city administrator / department head. This position then would oversee several departments, which would reduce the amount of direct reports that the city administrator would have. So the second point of focus from the committee was regarding development services. As an overview, the Development Services Director has been an open, unfilled position since April of 2022. We've had 3 rounds of recruiting for the position. 2 job offers were presented to separate candidates, both declining the position for various reasons. The city planner was vacated and has been unfilled since October of 2022. We've had 2 rounds of recruiting for the position, and both rounds have failed to fill the position. And the associate planner position, open and unfilled since May of 2022, had 2 rounds of recruiting for the position, both rounds as well failing in filling the position. At the end of 2022, during budget discussions, the decision was made to delay both the hiring of the Development Services Director and the city planner until March of 2023. Additionally, the associate planner position was placed on hold for 2023 and not included in the overall annual budget for the year. So as previously mentioned, with all these positions being unfilled, we currently are contracting with 2 services to handle some of the development services workload. The first is Cedar Corp and the other is Short, Elliott, and Hendricks, or SEH. So Bryce Hembrook is contracted through SEH and Josh Miller through Cedar Corp, both previous employees in the Development Services Department, and that had an immediate impact in work being done in the department, however, as mentioned, on a very part-time basis weekly. Approximate costs for both professional services each month total around $8,000, and their scope of work is primarily for economic development and higher level city planning and does not necessarily include day-to-day activities that would normally have been completed by an associate planner. As a result, some of those duties are completed by others within the department, but only as time permits. With all of that information, the committee discussed all of the open development services positions and made several suggestions to be reviewed. The first was the Development Services Director position being eliminated. Candidates that previously had interviewed and or were offered the position of Development Services Director were typically stronger and more qualified for either economic development or city planning, but generally not equally strong in both. As an alternative, the recommendation was to create an economic development position, refill the city planner position, and continue to pause and review the associate planner position. So as you can see in this slide, it illustrates that potential change. The director and the associate planner positions would be eliminated, a new economic development position would be created, and the city planner position would be refilled. This would address the concerns regarding the director position being difficult to fill with the right person with all the desired skill sets. But some pitfalls would be that it would not address the need for oversight of the department that the director position had previously provided, or address the daily tasks that are completed by the associate planner. Additionally, without a director, the number of direct reports to the city administrator would go from 9 direct reports to 11 direct reports. One thing to mention is having, as I'm sure you know, having a direct point of contact for development services is critical when looking, for example, at potential businesses interested in coming into Marshfield. Each area of development services, meaning building, plumbing inspection, economic development, city planning, all of them have pieces of information and responsibilities that could and would directly impact bringing a new business to the city. And if each works too independently, or maybe there's a lack of direction or communication on any part, it could cause a business to potentially reconsider. So the committee recognized all of this, and additional potential solutions were created. So this is the final slide that was presented to the Common Council by Alderperson Tom Witzel. This offers a few solutions to review and discuss. It incorporates both focus points. One, reducing headcount reporting directly to the city administrator, as well as addressing development services. So first, this proposal does eliminate the development services director position and does create an economic development position. It would move the assessor position, which is currently the contracted position that I mentioned in the beginning, from reporting directly to the city administrator and moving it to reporting directly to the clerk. So when looking at all of the director department level positions, they tend to fall into 2 buckets. One is more internally focused, working more with staff, and more limited in working with citizens and businesses. The other is very externally focused, partnering internally with staff as needed, but working extensively with citizens and businesses. Internal focus teams were identified as clerk, HR, finance, communication, and IT. External focus teams were identified as economic development, inspection, planning, parks and recreation, and public works. And as you can see on this slide, 2 options were presented regarding adding an additional position of assistant city administrator. In both option 1 and option 2, it would be a position that could focus on either external or internal focused groups. Also, with both options, the city administrator direct report headcount would be reduced to 6 direct reports. So with option 1, this would mean a newly created position. The person hired for the position would have a primary focus on community development. This would include direct oversight of the development services group, as well as being first point of contact for parks and recreation and public works. All of these departments mentioned have the external focus and in part need to work together in a variety of ways to complete city projects. Option 2, this would either be a newly created position, standalone assistant city administrator, or an elevated position for a current director. If it's a current director, they would oversee their current department as well as being the first point of contact for all other internal focused departments previously mentioned. Both options would have this person taking on some of the city administration duties to assist the city administrator, as well as for succession planning purposes for future. So just some information to consider as we continue. When developing this PowerPoint, I partnered with finance to discuss the overall 2023 budget for development services to better understand the savings from the vacancies, as well as the cost from the professional services that we utilize right now. Based on savings and cost, The current budget for 2023 could support a few options, including adding an assistant city administrator position, keeping the professional services of SEH and Cedar Corp, and potentially updating and refilling the associate planner position for those day-to-day activities that aren't fully covered by the professional services. In this example, creating and approving job descriptions, recruiting for the positions, and having a tentative goal date of September to fill them. The current budget should be able to support those changes. All of these are based on assumptions of costs for positions that haven't yet been assessed for compensation, and all would only be for the 2023 budget. For 2024, if we move forward with ending the professional services, adding an economic development position, and refilling the city planner position, budget adjustments would need to be made just to make sure that we had the right budget for 2024. If other options are preferred, further financial review would be necessary just to determine if the current budget could support the positions. Other options based on everything that's been discussed could be: one, keeping the development services director position and refocusing our efforts on a new model of recruiting. In the past, we've utilized GovHR. They helped us in sourcing some candidates. However, there are other agency options and other recruiting methods that we could use if, again, keeping the development services director position would be preferred. Number two, we could create and fill the economic development position, like create it and start it right away. Three would be refill the city planner position. Again, if we went this route, I really feel like we would have to have a new method for recruiting. We'd have to look at other things other than what we kind of have always done. So we'd have to keep that in mind because there would definitely be a potential cost there. 4, elevate a current department head to also be an assistant city administrator. Or 5, any combination of all of those options. So, as mentioned at the start of the presentation, it was directed from the April 11th Common Council meeting to bring to this committee the findings and recommendations from the Organizational Chart Committee for your review, recommendations, and decisions on next steps. I definitely appreciate your time. I know this is a lot of information. This is a high-level overview, and with further direction from this group, more specific details like compensation, budget, et cetera, all of that can be created and provided to this group as needed in the future. So further steps are at the discretion of this committee, and I look forward to your feedback, and I can definitely answer any questions that you might have at this time.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Can you leave your presentation up on the screen? Because I think there's going to be questions and probably people wanting you to flip to certain slides if I'm anticipating.
Sure.
So we're going to go to the committee. It's a lot to discuss. So who wants to start? Ed?
Thank you. Sarah, first of all, I really wanted to thank you. That's giving it at least a historical bend. At least the people who are newer on the council can see the torturous path you've been on for this thing came on board. I'm really dismayed about a lot of things on here. And when it was my responsibility to organize a government, one of the things I found out was that those bricks and mortar types of jobs that are done by city crews need to be coordinated, need to be under one house. And so what I created was, and you've got something similar to it here. You've got a director of community development. Yeah, well, it's the same thing that I prefer to seeing that, except it's called Community Planning and Development, CPD. And basically that brings everything in, and we brought in that allows us to bring the permitting section in there to make sure that when there's a business that wants to come to Marshfield or a business that wants to come to any city in particular, they come in and they sit down to a team of like 5 or 6 guys, not an overwhelming number, but maybe 5 or 6 guys or women. I forgot about that, but in the old days, that's all it was. But But they can sit down with that group at a table, and everybody knows what's going on. And the permitting guys were saying, hey, look, I'm going to have a problem with that unless we work together and do this, that, or the other thing. My bias, because of the background I come from, my bias is to have that CPD director reporting directly to the mayor. Because, I mean, well, in a strong mayor system, that's the most important thing. Even in a weak mayor system, the mayor can't be the last one to find out about anything, although that does happen. My preference would be heavily leaning towards having that person, having that pyramid of bricks and mortar operations reporting directly to a CPD director, and then that person reporting directly to the mayor. I think we would probably end up inserting indirect reports to Plan Commission and to maybe finance and budget in some regards. But again, that's the kind of thing I'd like to see, and that's what I'd like to see done. When was that? Yesterday? I'm serious. It shocks me every time I see we've got that one position that's been open since April of last year. I mean, that's just amazing. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with our efforts or what we're putting in there. I don't know, but we need to get that full-time position on board, at least that CPD, and let the CPD pick his or her staff to work under it, and maybe do a little bit of tweaking to the organization under it also. That's what I feel would be most expedient for the city. You got to have a leader there. You got to have somebody to do it. And I don't particularly like the staff below being added before the guy who's going to have to work with them, supervise them, and direct and inspire them. I don't want that person picked. I don't want the staff to pick, the lower tier staff to pick their own boss.
Sure.
And I want, it's the other way around. I want that leader to inspire and lead. I don't want the staff to inspire and lead the director. That's absolutely different. So that's where I stand on it. And I maybe reserve some more time to talk later, depending on the comments.
So if I can we go back, to one of these screens, and Ed, can you kind of point out where you're talking about, where would that come off of?
There's another slide she had that is almost perfectly pointing that out, and it basically shows the outside is there. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, you see the Public Works Director, Director of Parks and Recreation. Those are the areas that I'm talking about that need to have a direct line to whoever's in charge, and that would be either to the city administrator or to the mayor. I did leave the city administrator out of that, but that person would also be an assistant city administrator, and that would be only for the purpose of saving money, which I think we could do. So does that help?
Yeah. All right, anybody else have questions? Natasha?
Thank you. Can I put Mr. Stauberg on the spot, because you have a master's degree in, don't you? You don't. You do. In city administration or municipal administration. I just want to know, if when you look at this, is there any red flags or anything that you say, we know that this doesn't work? Or
Russ, I'm going to ask you to go to the podium, please.
So a couple of thoughts come to mind. One is, which agency are we working with to do the recruiting that was mentioned? Some are more effective than others. There are quite a few that are out there that will help you find suitable candidates. It could be a college professor that is already working with students and could just onboard them to a new career. The other thought I have is that it really depends upon the caliber and the type of person you bring on. So, for example, the city administrator may have a knack for economic development, or a city administrator may have a knack for something else. So, depending upon which people we have in place currently or which ones we bring on, might determine how the organization might ebb and flow a little bit. So, I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but one thought I guess that I had too is, what does our future look like 1 year, 2 year, 3 years from now with our existing staff? So, okay.
Natasha, do you have follow-up for Mr. Stauber?
When you look at this organizational chart and you see, like maybe someone being a part of a department head plus being an administrative assistant, does that look like something that's viable, or does that look like?
Yeah, the concept of wearing two hats is a viable option, right? So whether you bring someone in and that person acts as an assistant city administrator, maybe with a path forward to administrator later, that's one option. If you find someone within the ranks now that has an interest in stepping up, we have a history of that. Mike Brim was a comptroller. Before that, he was an accountant. He became a pretty effective city administrator. Yeah. So it really depends, I think, on the talent pool that we have and where their interests are in the future.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody have anything else? Sure, Andrew, go ahead.
I'll be brief. So am I correct to say, or did I understand correctly, that we don't currently understand, or not understand, but know what the cost effect's going to be of any of these reorganizational moves?
We can guesstimate, but typically if we're creating a new position or even like making significant changes, we typically run that through McGrath, and then they help us determine compensation from there. So we can look at comparables from other areas that they have it, which is kind of like what we use to kind of guesstimate right now. But until we would run through that process, we wouldn't know like more exact details.
So the guesstimate right now is what? Did it increase our costs or decrease, hold steady? I'm not gonna hold your feet to the fire. I'm just
No, it really totally depends on the direction that we decide to go. So it kind of depends on which positions we decide to go with when. And then part of that too is when we can fill, once we get things rolling. That's why there's a lot of variables in there. So it kind of more or less would come down to the more direction that I get as far as like where we need to go, the more specific I can come back and provide a lot more detail for this group.
Okay, and then one of the slides on there, you had option 1 and option 2. One was more outward facing, one more inward facing. Is there a reason we can't do both?
We had discussed doing both, and I think the thought process there was just, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that, but in our organizational chart meeting, we did discuss both, and I think ultimately just determined the cost aspect of it, especially with how our budget has been, just wasn't a viable option.
Oh, perfect. And then just one last thing. Thank you for this, because I can tell you put a lot of time into it. There was a lot of information, as you said, so I know this wasn't something you did just last night as you were going to bed. So with that being said, if it's possible to get this beforehand so we can kind of process it a little bit, at least for me, be helpful. I don't know about anyone else, but like I said, it's a lot of information. It's good information. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Go ahead, Natasha.
So I'm just wondering what our next step would be. I mean, I think every single person in the room would say we have too many direct reports to our administrator. It is causing, I would assume, a backload, a log jam, all kinds of stuff. So I think this is needed. And yes, we have to figure out, can we afford it? But what's our next step?
I think it's probably a little bit more direction on what this group feels like where we need to go. I don't want to make any assumptions. I can certainly make recommendations, just as you guys have recommended some things too. So it really just depends on what this group wants to do next.
And what would you recommend? You're the human resources person. You're the one who has seen organizational things. So what looks good for you from looking at our group?
Personally, I think that in talking with previously Stephen Wiley when he was in the city planner position, in talking with a little bit of the building plumbing inspection group, and then just kind of looking at job descriptions and things like that, and then from commentary that we had during the org chart meeting, I really think option one of having the assistant city administrator / community development, whatever, that piece, I think that one is super critical. One, because that group, even though we have so many vacancies, that group definitely is missing out on having the ability to have daily direction, right? They don't have necessarily a point person that's available all the time. I mean, right now they go to Steve, but Steve has other direct reports that he has to, work with as well. So I think it's really critical to provide some direct supervision for that group. But additionally, I also think from an assistant city administrator side of things, we do have to be looking at the next several years at what happens next, essentially what is Steve's plans potentially, and it would be nice to potentially find someone that would be able to prep for eventually potentially taking over that role. But then too, I think with that option, as Mr. Wagner mentioned, what's nice is that would really kind of loop up all of the external, very community-facing positions. And that person would definitely be like a project master. So they would definitely be providing good daily direction. They would be a good point person. We would have the ability to help them feel comfortable in their role and then build their team. So personally, that would be what I would say would be the top priority.
Ed?
Thank you. On your slide entitled Potential Future State, you're showing very clearly what option one is and then option two. And basically what I think I was describing more fits into option one as opposed to option two. And I think you just clarified that even further.
Yep.
What I'd recommend, what you asked what was next, and I think that's what the staff is asking. They're asking us to make some sign of what direction we want them to go in so that they can pursue this post haste and get it done, get the job done soon. So that being the case, I will be the skunk at the picnic again and make a motion that we recommend option number one be pursued with all due dispatch.
Okay, so we have a motion that we look at option, or that we start to actively look for somebody to fill the position of community development director, or whatever title.
Slash city administrator.
Slash assistant city administrator. And is there a second?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Does everyone understand what we're talking about?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
You sure can.
Is this the position you're talking about? Did we split the duties? Because Sarah was saying it's hard to hire someone who can both be development director and do all the city codes, and that should be potentially two different people. So is that what this position will do? Will it help? Will someone else take care of the codes?
So basically what option one shows is we would hire that higher level position. They would be overseeing community development. We'd have to obviously work on the job title and things like that. But then their team would be economic development and city planner. So economic development, again, would be a newly created position. and then city planner would be our existing position with the ability to do an associate planner. But again, I think once we have the right person in place to kind of oversee the department, and once they were able to work with the professional services that we have, get a feel for everything, I think then they would be able to help us determine and help this group determine really what the rest of those positions would look like.
So would the job description change? Like if you started to recruit, would you change the job description? So maybe people who say, hey, I'm not so good at doing the city planning part, but I'm better at this, they would be more attracted to it? Would that?
Basically, we would essentially call it out that we're not looking for like specific years of experience in planning or specific years of experience in economic development. What we might do is instead of requiring that, it might be like a preferred type of skill. But again, this is a job description that it doesn't even exist because this position hasn't existed. So I think that would be an additional direction that we could take from this group as far as like, what do you see as well in that position? We can present some options and ideas and then make decisions from there. But I definitely think from a starting point, once I have a little bit of an understanding of the direction, then I can easily start bringing forward very quickly next items to discuss and look for approval on.
Mm-hmm. Anything further? Go ahead, Andrew.
Just one brief question, just help me understand the graph. How frequently does the city of Marshfield change its org chart? I ask because I've been in organizations that they do it almost every other year, and then some that rarely, if ever, change it, and they're very rigid with it.
I've only been here for not even a year yet, so
we'll defer to Tom. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, I've only been here 27 years, but the last time the org chart was actually adjusted was in 2014, and that was when building inspection and such was removed from under Director of Public Works and moved into planning and zoning. And then the GIS coordinator was moved under engineering at that time. That was the bulk of the big change that was done at that time. So just a little history.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Nothing further.
Anybody else? So I believe we do have a motion and a second. Can you read that back to us, Jessica?
You have a motion by Alderperson Wagner and a second by Alderperson Varsho to direct staff to recommend council approval of moving forward with option 1 being pursued, which would be would be the creation of a assistant city administrator / community development something title that would be brought forth later.
You add quickly.
Yeah, I believe he wanted.
Post-haste.
Yes, I think he wanted. So to me, that means you want to start recruiting immediately. Correct?
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Does this decrease the amount of direct reports to the city administrator?
it would, because the assistant city administrator would basically, the direct reports would be all of those external focused groups, departments.
So all of the ones that are in the teal color.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anything further? So we do have a motion and we do have a second. We should take a vote on that, okay?
Good idea.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, that passes 5-0. So there you go, Sarah. New project.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. That was number 8. We're going into number 9, report of legal costs, which was a request from Council Member Tompkins, presented by Sarah Dressel.
So I apologize, you're probably getting really sick of hearing my voice. So at the June 6th Finance Budget Personnel meeting, under suggested items for future agendas, Councilmember Tompkins requested information related to the city's legal services and costs and asked specific questions, and Steve did provide some answers to those questions. As far as legal costs to date, through the first 5 months of 2023, we have spent approximately 61% of the city attorney's budget. Budget is $175K, and we have spent $106.29. Another $4,140 has been charged to the city's, or to the council's budget, which is 59% of the council's 2023 budget for legal fees. So additionally, we've paid $3,340 to Stafford Law for legal expenses associated with employment law issues, or roughly 17% of the $20,000 budget. So overview of the legal costs. Methods for billing: the city attorney charges the city at a billing rate of $200 and bills in increments of the 1/10 of an hour. So every 6 minutes, we're charged $20. The city's current agreement with the city attorney, it was attached, so for reference. And Stafford Law does charge $275 per hour for the services of the attorney that does handle our account for that, which is Pam Plor. Access to the city attorney, as outlined, which was also attached in 3D of Section 240 of the Marshfield Municipal Code. The city attorney's job duties does include consulting with and advising the mayor, council, city administrator, all department heads, and independent boards and commissions. So Steve wrote that at times he does wish that we had a filter to restrict the city attorney's time, which would ultimately limit costs. But consulting with those individuals and providing them with legal advice is clearly part of the city attorney's responsibilities. And in allowing someone in any position, really, to screen requests for direct access to the city attorney might prevent an issue from being addressed early, which could create a whole litany of issues. So with that, it was just kind of for informational purposes only, but if there's any questions that I can also seek out answers to, I am available.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I might as well apologize right now. So you said that the access to the city attorney is dictated by ordinance, is that correct?
I believe by municipal code.
Municipal code, okay. Which is done, is that done through ordinance?
Yes.
Okay. Because I understand the hesitation with that. In case you don't know, I'm a lawyer. That's why I'm apologizing right now, because it fell in my lap here. But hourly rate's not concerning, but I will tell you that billing hourly, the biggest way to rack up fees is to have someone ask you the same question a number of times or asking a poor question. The concern about not getting it answered fast enough, usually if you need to have an answer within 24 hours, you're probably already behind the 8 ball at that point. So I probably would, eventually here, I can't make a motion or anything like that, I'm not even trying to, but we should probably take a long look at who has access to the city attorney. For one, in case it's already been answered by someone else, if there's a repository of something, we can say, so-and-so already asked a question, here's the answer. And it is a skill to be able to ask a very succinct and pointed question as opposed to something that's kind of vague. Because when I get a question that's vague, you're getting all the answers with all the options that might or may not happen, when a simple yes or no could have been the case. So that's one way that could very much, reduce our fees, just simply by being prudent with how we ask the questions and how often we ask the questions. Not to say that we should discourage anyone from asking questions, but just make sure that we're not asking questions that have been asked 3 times over, just by a different department.
Sure.
Natasha, go ahead.
Thank you. That was great. Yeah, and the thing I'm also concerned about is I wonder if there's some, we're using the attorney for some things that potentially staff could answer questions for. For example, if we meet with the city lawyer, if a new council member, new person on a committee meets with the city lawyer for an hour to learn how to run a meeting or what Robert's rules are, Jessica knows how to run the meetings, But, you could teach people how to run a meeting, or you could give people a handout and say, hey, read this, come back to me with questions, and that might save us $200. So, we might just need to look at this and say, do we really want everyone going to our attorney and asking, the question that maybe he's been asked 5 times this year? Maybe there's, maybe they go to someone else first who says, I already have that answer. I already have it written down. It was written for us, So I I don't know what you all think about maybe, should we look at this? Maybe looking at our code and changing our points of contact so it's not everyone carte blanche gets to access the city lawyer. Maybe they have to go through someone else.
Anybody else have any? Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I believe me when I hear how much we're paying out and knowing that, and also when that list of who the attorney has to be accessible to, I cringe every time I see that because, I don't like to spend money. But the thing that gets me is, in order to put up a gatekeeper between the city attorney and any one of those number of publics that he has to serve, that means you have to anticipate every possible question that could be asked, and ones that are so sensitive that you don't want to take it to the city administrator. You don't want to take it to your boss. In the case of a sexual harassment or something like that, you don't want to take it to your boss. You don't want to have to go to a gatekeeper to tell him or her what's happening. And that's the problem. And you have to, if we're going to erect a gatekeeper in this thing somewhere, it's got to be like multiple gatekeepers so that when in the chain of command, out of the chain of command, out into the political process, out of the political process. I just don't know how to, I understand the problem, I just don't know how to deal with it.
Could there be a frequently asked question packet that we give to new council people and committee members? And, so that those questions aren't asked, or say, hey, go to this first, or could we have a training of how to run meetings, where Jessica's hiding, when we have a new election cycle or something where, the 5 new people who are on committees who have been appointed all can come together for a group class or something. Like, could we do things like that to help eliminate costs up front?
All right, I'm going to bring Jessica into this conversation.
I'll just add that I do meet with new chair people of the committees to go over Robert's rules, open meeting laws, because that exact reason, running a government meeting is very different for a lot of individuals. So we get business owners on committees who are excellent at running business meetings and find it is incredibly different than running a governmental meeting. So I do sit down with all the new chair people, not necessarily all the new members though, but I can expand that.
Okay, I'm just going to input a little bit here. So, I understand the concern, and of course, we're always trying to look at budget and how we can save money, because it is the taxpayers' money that we're spending after all. There's a lot of things that haven't been taken to our city attorney in the past, though, that's gotten us into trouble. And so that door swings actually both ways. And in particular, we've had a number of development agreements that could have been improved upon had they been reviewed by our city attorney and saved us problems, significant problems. We've also had a lot of legal issues, personnel related and things like that over the last couple of years that probably changed everyone's opinion on how they were going to speak to the city attorney. So while I agree that there could be a method to somehow putting answers to questions that he's already answered so that the same person isn't going to him and racking up 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. That's something I think we can look at. And as far as training for members to commissions and boards and committees, I'm going to suggest that Jessica do a video, perhaps with Tom Laux, and that video could be put up on the page. That way she's not being interrupted continuously with new people coming on, because we constantly have new people. Somebody's left and we need to reappoint, somebody's left and reappoint. We can't expect her to keep doing that. But we could take a little bit of time and have her actually do a professional video that's available maybe on the website, where we can direct some of these commissions, boards, committee members especially. So be the star that you are, Jessica. And as far as questions that have already been answered, I know that there are occasions our city administrator sends out a memorandum of understanding that kind of concludes things, and you can tell that that was driven by questions that have been asked of him. But I don't know exactly what precludes him from doing that all the time or with everybody. I'm sure he's a really good attorney, so I know he knows what he's doing. So I think that we can look at it, but I would hesitate on putting 1 to 2 gatekeepers as Ed titled them. So getting back to the actual, so this is really none. This was just for informational purposes only. I would say that if we want to look at this at a more closer level, that we eventually ask that this get put onto a council agenda so that we can figure out how we want to address that. But I would encourage Jessica to probably start thinking about a video as far as running meetings and Robert's Rules of Order and things like that, if you don't mind. Anything else? No. Okay, we're going to move on to number 10. And this will be our continue informational session on budget policy. This is going to be presented by Jennifer Zielinski. But before you start, Jennifer, I do want to say it occurred to me after the last finance meeting, which you did a fabulous job, that we probably should have directed the Board of Public Works members to watch that video, or at least let them know that you did that presentation. And I don't think we did that, because I think there's a lot of them that maybe would tune in at least, and I don't know how much of them watch full on meetings, but if they didn't get the opportunity, I think maybe that's a good idea to maybe forward that part of the video to all of the Common Council, because it was so good. And with that, I will give you the floor.
All right, so the last couple of meetings, we've been talking about different budget topics, and last week there was a lot of information, so I've decided to break that down and focus on just a small part of all of that was presented. And so tonight I chose unassigned fund balance, and I included in your handout what I presented last week, and then I had some additional thoughts and put those in red. So the first couple of pages are the same, but where you have a choice, and I didn't call it out last time, is how much fund balance we should keep. Our current policy is 25 to 30% of general fund revenues, but communities are all over the board when it comes to how much they keep. 25 to 30%, I've seen it often enough. The GFOA recommends 2 months of routine expenditures or revenues. We could actually use actual expenditures rather than budgeted expenditures. And then I toyed with the idea of excluding contingency, but we actually do use contingency, just not all of it. So I don't think it would be appropriate to actually exclude it. In the event that we come in with our fund balance greater than 30%, we have some options that we could, by policy, state how we would use those. So we've already mentioned we could contribute to capital expenditures, reduce borrowing. We could also expand government services, or we could establish the maximum budgeted amount of contingency that we would allow to be used. So for instance, if we had 30.2% of unassigned fund balance, that 0.2% could be set aside as, okay, this is what we're really going to establish as our contingency, because right now we're using contingency, but it's coming out of fund balance. It's not, it's further degrading when we use it. So in that case, we could actually plan to use an excess that we actually have. And then this is where I would leave it open for any discussion on any other ideas that you might want to see formalized in the policy. So that's something that we can talk about. But before we do that, I also looked back over the last 10 years of what our fund balance has been doing. And from 2013 to 2022, we've had, you'll have your chart in there, the colored bar graph. Our fund balance ebbs and flows. And we've consistently been in that $5 to $7 million range. On your chart, green is good. Green is what's available for nearly any purpose that we could have. That orange color is our non-spendable, represents inventory, things that have already been converted. Cash has already been converted. It also represents our negative cash and other funds. So when we have a negative cash in a TID fund, it's considered an advance from the general fund, so we can't spend that. That is recorded as an asset, but we can't actually use that asset to pay off our liabilities. And then we have the committed, which is typically committed for the library or for continuing appropriations. And that I feel like is a reasonable amount that we've been showing and committing for purposes. So the story here is, you can tell when we had in 2018 and 2019, that huge flip-flop between our available unassigned fund balance and non-spendable. And that's where we discovered our issues with TID and had to fix that. And then we've slowly since then, in 2020, 2021, and 2022, been getting ourselves back on track with what we have in unassigned. If you look at the other handout titled Fund Balance in the General Fund, that top section is in dollars and percent of the budgeted expenditures according to our policy. So you'll see historically we were right in that range when this policy was last modified in 2014, all the way up until 2018 and 19 when we had our issue. And we dipped as low in 2019 as 11.6%, which is pretty dangerous. That's less than, should we've had an emergency, that would have been less than 2 months worth of expenditures on hand to deal with that. Since then, we've been climbing up, and we finished 2022 at 24.4%. So just almost at that minimum level. And what that equates to is about 2.9 months worth of expenditures on hand. So if we think back to the GFOA of recommending 2, we're definitely meeting and have met the GFOA's recommendation in all years except that 2018 year. Now, another way we could look at fund balance is based on actual expenditures. So that middle section does just that. The trend is the same. However, in 2022, if our policy had said unassigned fund balance as a percent of actual expenditures between 25 and 30%, we were at 25.6%. So we are with exactly where we want to be. And the difference there, in part, is how much we balance for contingency. In 2023, you'll see that that's a really big number. So it will make potentially make our current policy worse because of how much we put in there that we don't spend. So, thinking about changing that to actual expenditures, it's more, it takes out that strategy that we use in order to make ourselves eligible for future revenue increases and still remain eligible for expenditure restraint. And then lastly, I calculated the the fund balance requirements if we had been following the GFOA's recommendation of 2 months of actual expenditures. So 2 months gets us at 16.7%. And in most years, we would have had an excess of fund balance that we could have allocated elsewhere in our budget. I feel like 16.7% is really, really aggressive, especially in our situation where we have a very large tax appeal facing us. So if we were to allocate that money out and that tax appeal come back not in our favor, we wouldn't have a way to address it. And then I also just showed the same trend at 3 months. And again, in 2022, we would have had a little bit of excess, $126,000 that we could have applied somewhere else in the 2023 budget. So all in all, just giving you ways to think about how much we want to keep in our unassigned fund balance and how we want to measure ourselves. Whether we want to do it on budgeted expenditures, which can get a little skewy with our contingency strategy, or use actual expenditures, or follow the GFOA and get really aggressive. So with that, I would open up to any thoughts that I'll take note of. What I'm planning to do is, as we go through these policies, is keep the notes, and then once we get through them, present a draft that to bring back to you to vote on. So at this point, just really interested in whether you feel the 25 to 30% is appropriate as a percentage range, and then whether you want to use option basically 1, 2, or 3 for those.
Okay. I'm going to open it up for questions. Go ahead, Ed.
The fund balance, the general fund balance, or the expenditures out of the general fund at 22,507, 215. Does that include debt service? I mean, do we actually no?
No, debt service is accounted for outside of the general fund.
Okay. So. Wait, say that again.
It's debt service is accounted for in the debt service fund, which would be separate. So we're only talking general fund here. We're not talking any special revenues or capital projects, enterprise, internal service, none of those.
I've seen it bounce around, but between 22.5 and 22.4. That's actually been pretty stable, I guess. The expenditure. So is there something to account for that, or?
I think it's just, our revenues are also stable. So we try not to overspend. Structurally, we have budgeted a deficit, meaning we intend to use fund balance. We're moving away from that, where we're focused on only spending with what revenues we feel we have.
Thank you for this.
Go ahead, Natasha.
Okay, Jennifer, out of option 1, 2, and 3, which one did you say was potentially a little too aggressive considering our tax appeal?
The bottom, where we follow the GFOA's recommendation.
Okay, and do you feel like option 2 or 1 would sort of give us a buffer if we needed to repay taxes?
They allow for the similar buffer. I tend to like option 2, where we use actuals, simply because it takes that, our strategy for ERP and future revenue growth out of the equation. I mean, in 2023, we've got $2 million in there. That's going to be a big distortion to our minimum fund balance if we keep it as a budgeted expenditure. And so this is one of the measures that Moody's will look at when we are going up for rating is how much do you really have available as as per your policy to address future issues.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Anyone else or any follow-ups? Okay, so Jennifer, are you looking for any direction right now, or this was information only?
Just your thoughts that I will use to revise the policy so that I can bring forth one that's, I will ask you to take action on. Really, that very last paragraph of what are we going to do once we achieve 30% of an assigned fund balance? Are you comfortable with that list? Are there things you wouldn't want formalized in a policy? Are there other ideas?
Anyone have anything that they want to give her direction on? I mean, I personally like option 2. Do you have what you need from that?
I think so.
We had a lot of 2s come up there. Okay.
Sounds good. That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's see. Number 11, staff update on taxi purchase presented by Jordan Munger, County Manager.
Hi, everyone. So we do a bi-weekly staff division and department head meeting, and this kind of came up at it. Really, it's just an informational one. The reason it's coming up is we're getting a van for the shared ride service, and the price of that van, I just want to show you and illustrate you what costs have done over the last time that we purchased a van and what they're at now. The last time we purchased a van, I believe, was in either 2019 or 2020, June 2020. The cost of that van was $38,000. The price of the van that we are receiving on Thursday is $62,600. Now, fortunately, we are a member of a grant program, and we pay only 20% of the share. So 80% of that is covered by the federal government. But what I want to tell you is we had to take out loans over 2 successive periods, I believe, in order to build enough balance to grab this opportunity. There's going to be, and this is also for a 2022 taxi. So we ordered this, expected it in 2022. It came in 2023. It's coming on Thursday, halfway through the year, almost halfway through the year. So we're slated for another 2 vans, hopefully by the end of this year. This may require a budget resolution later on because I didn't carry forward some of this taxi into 2022, but I do have budget room so far because we have 2 taxis available. I just want to make you aware that if I come to you because of a budget resolution, that's why. So we're purchasing this one. We got it on order. We're good to go. If we need another one, I'll let you know, or a budget resolution. So any questions?
Questions from the committee? Sure. No, but I do want to thank you for bringing that forward to us early in the game.
No, it was a great recommendation by our department heads as well. So thank you all.
Thanks, Jordan. All right, number 12, determine date and time for first committee meeting in July, presented by Sarah Dressel, Human Resources Director.
Thank you. So the first meeting for Finance, Budget, and Personnel in July, if we kept it as is, would fall on the July 4th date. So obviously that's a holiday. And so looking ahead, there is potential for rescheduling either to the 3rd or the 5th. Right now, as mentioned, it's a little too early to determine if we just don't have anything and would be canceling it. But I would be looking to this group to see if we have interest in moving it to either the 3rd or the 5th.
Okay, yep, the July 4th does indeed fall smack on a Tuesday. So does anybody have an opinion? I do want to say I think that we need to include the JL meeting along with this schedule. So we're looking at JL and finance at this point. Brian?
July 5th would be better. I'm off of work on July 3rd, so I won't be around.
Okay. Anyone else? Andrew?
Exact opposite for me. I got a trial on the 5th, which will most likely take me through about 7 p.m.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can we do it on a Thursday? July 6th. Why not? If we have 2 people, we can't be.
I don't know. I don't think we have any other standing meetings on a first Thursday evening.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any? I mean, I will be out of state at that time, but I will be attending virtually no matter which day we put it on so far anyway. So do we want to go with Thursday, the 6th for both JL and finance? So we'll go ahead and do that. If you find out there is something else in there, please let us know that, Jessica. So we'll plan on moving the scheduled, the meeting that would have fell on July 4th for JL and finance to Thursday, July 6th, times the same.
Can we do that formally though with the motion, please?
Yep. So we're looking for a motion. Motion from Andrew. Second by Brian. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. There you go. Number 13, report and recommendation from the Marshfield Utility Review Committee, presented by Ed Wagner, Council President.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The hard part is done, I think. We've been negotiating, I think, for 6 months with the water utility about what funds that are available for the use of the city and what funds are used by the utility. We did come away with some agreements. It wasn't really supposed to be a negotiating session because actually that's our utility. That's the city's utility, and we have ultimate control over that utility. But there were some things that needed to be changed in the policy. And the way we have some decisions to make tonight, or I'm hoping it's tonight, but they gave us three possible options for funding, for changing our city policy through ordinance, through drafting an ordinance. And then, by the way, that's what the object of this exercise is to give us a direction as to which way you want that ordinance to be written, and we can turn it over to HAP. And I see you've already got yours out, so that's good. The first option leaves things just the way they are as far as the transfer of funds from the ATC, that's the American Transmission Corporation, dividend to the city of Marshfield that they pay every year. And the utility decided some time ago, I think it was 2010, 2011, that they would give the city, they would transfer to the city 50% of the net dividend paid for that they got from from ATC, and that has been in 2011 when they did that, they changed the city policy that money from ATC, they went exclusively to the Economic Development Board, and they should have complete and total control over that, and nobody else had anything to say about it. That was sort of painful for us during the budget decisions last year. So, but basically they want that to remain the same. The amount is going to remain the same. They agreed that 50% of the net was a good number for us to work with. So the difference, we could leave it as it is. That's option one. Option two was changed a little bit in the description of what happens to the funds. Okay, so policy number 2 says a transfer of funds derived from the utility, derived from the below line from below the line income and annual net investments in American Transmission Corporation, hereinafter ATC, and a percentage of annual investment interest earnings shall be vested in the common council to support city operations. So, and that basically comes back here, and the Economic Development Board would come back with their budget, and we would approve their budget like any other, city department. There's something that would add to all three of them. They add under procedure, under Title IV procedure, the utility shall provide the finance director annually with a memorandum showing the approved amounts to be transferred to the city with supporting calculations. The finance director shall provide this information to the city administrator and common council during the budget process. So if that's the same for all of them, that's basically how do you get the money from point A to point B, and that's the mechanism that's going to be used. The third option was in Title III policy said, transfer of the funds from the utility shall be vested in the common council to support city operations, period. But that same, the utility shall provide the finance director annually with a memorandum showing the approved amounts to be transferred to the city with supporting calculations, yada, yada, yada. It's the same thing, same one. So all three of them are the same. So what we're looking at here is a difference between, what level of authority does the city have to use that money to balance the budget or whatever. So those are the three policies there. The other thing and again, it sounded more like a negotiation than it should have, but there is, they are making some amount of money off of their investments and the interest of cash they're holding. And I tried to be very gentle with that initially, and I said, well, maybe 25%. And they came back and said, oh, we were going to write up the policy at 20%. I said, oh, come on. So, but we just went back to the 25%. So that would give us some amount of, I think the number that they estimated in one of the years, and I think the last year would have been about $98,000 additional for the city. I may be wrong about that, but I seem to remember that on a spreadsheet that they provided. So basically we want to approve one of the three policy options. We want to approve the 25%, and we need to deal with the touchiest issue of all, the makeup of the utility commission itself. And the utility commissions have a rather strange bit of statute behind them. Basically what happens is if they say you can have a 3, 5, or 7 member commission. And the fly in the ointment is if you have a 3-member commission, their terms have to be only 3 years. If it's 5 members, then you say it's 5 years. If it's 7 members, it's 7. What we wanted to do, and one of the big goals of the council, and Mr. Wetzel was very high on this, as was Mr. Fisher in the previous council. And they wanted to have at least 2 alderpersons on that commission, and they wanted them to be full members of the commission. We have a provision now where there are 2 alderpersons that are on the commission, but they're listed as observers. They can't vote. Generally, I think when I was there, I violated their rule and I spoke, but it was surprise. But anyway, the other end, but they will not allow you in a closed session. You are not allowed to see what they're doing in closed session. They escort you out. And that has been very irritating to older persons who don't like being escorted out. So basically, the one thing we had talked about was the going with the 7-member commission, or writing an ordinance with the 7-member commission and have that out. So those are the decisions that I'd like you to talk about and make a recommendation on. If we're going to meet again on July 6th, we may want to table, you may want to hold off on making an actual decision until July 6th, but I think the sooner we write the policy, the better. And by the way, the only reason we need to do this is to give HAP instructions on what to write into the ordinance change. So with that, I'll close and sit back and listen to what you have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ed, for that. So this, again, is the discretion of the committee. So is there anybody want to start a discussion or make any motions, or what do you want to do? Natasha?
Okay, give me a little bit of guidance. I would like to see the council vote on putting 2 full members that have voting privileges as well as closed session privileges on the utility commission. So I don't know if we would vote this here and then pass it here and then move it on, but I would like this to be brought to a vote. So would that be something that we bring that?
That would be made as a motion, and we would need a second, and then at the council level, it would just be pulled from the minutes if somebody wanted to discuss, or?
You would be making a motion in a second to send that to revision of ordinance because any makeup of any committee is built into municipal code. So you would actually need an ordinance drafted with that direction.
Okay.
So you would start with making that motion here. It would go to council through consent agenda to give that direction to drafted ordinance.
Okay, so I move that we draft an ordinance that would change the composition of the utility commission to have 2 council members who have full vote and full privileges for all meetings, including closed session.
So we do have a motion. Is there a second? A second by Mr. Wagner. You absolutely may.
Can I just clarify, Ms. Tompkins, are you looking to then change the whole body to 7 members instead of 5?
Yes.
And not reduce the number
Right.
of, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further questions or comments? Go ahead, Andrew.
Is this premature as far as making it a 7-member body? Because as Mr. Wagner pointed out, if it becomes a 7-member body, we now have 7-year terms, which at least first blush to me, I'd defer to someone who's more of an expert in this than I am, but 7 years seems like a long term. And then secondly, the other issue that comes up is if the terms for council people is 2 years, how do we address the fact that they're on the board for 7 or 5 or 3 for that matter?
Okay, yep, that was a question we discussed quite lengthy, actually. Ed, you want to go ahead and?
Yeah, there's quite a body of literature available talking about how utility commissions are better run with longer term membership, and it's primarily because of the technical nature of the rate cases and things of that nature. The other point I wanted to make about it, though, is that there's a conflict with the life expectancy, the term of office of aldermen, and that we are at 2-year terms. So that means that there may be one of those seats may be turning over. But what that would mean is that the mayor would make the appointment or the appointment to fill, okay, if somebody served 2 years, or if they had a 7-year term and then served 2 years, then the person that you would appoint at the next council meeting would be to fill the unexpired term. And if that person was gone, then the next one would fill the unexpired term until it became, we started all over, it was start all over again. So that, there was a great deal of discussion about that. And the utility is, I see Nick on there, and I know he is very much opposed to this. He likes the 5-member commission and the 5-year terms the way they are. He has written us, as a matter of fact, he wrote something to the council, I think, last month in supporting a 5-member commission. I want to be fair about that, so.
Does that clarify that for you?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we had that in front of us here before we went forward in case someone's watching and needs to put together a couple of things at once. So thank you.
Nick, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
May I speak?
You absolutely may.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I guess to Mr. Wagner's point, I did provide you guys comments directly on my positioning on the body. I mean, I think I'd like to, as far as the close, I mean, some of the statements that were made are not completely accurate and how we operate. I mean, policy is what drives everything, and I guess I'm not going to get into those weeds. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if the issue is trust, which I've heard from others, I don't know how you're going to fix that with just adding 2 members to the body, because you still have 8 more council members that are not part of the body. So you ultimately, I don't believe you're going to get to the root here and fix it through this measure. And I wish we had a better discussion, more open, maybe even a joint meeting between the council and the commission to talk about this and understand where the gaps are and figure out ways to close it. I think there's, again, that's my belief in it. I wish we had a better, more dialogue on it to understand what the challenges are and what are the root causes and opportunities to fix those issues. I mean, ultimately, the city, we're having these discussions about financial situations because of positive positioning of the utility and well-run utility in my regard, in my position. And obviously, I'm kind of patting myself on my back that way, but I think that we're doing a good thing. And if we weren't, then we would have obviously negative conversations or having to figure out ways to fix things that are, we're not doing that right now. We're in a good spot. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Is there anything else? Natasha?
Just as a rebuttal that this is a democracy and we do have representation from citizens, and that's how our city government has been set up. The utilities is under the authority of the Common Council. So to ask the council to have a voting voice and to be present during all negotiations, to me is furthering transparency. It's also furthering communication, and it actually is building trust.
Anybody have any other input? I will say to me, I believe from my standpoint only, that I do think that there should be council representation and they should have voting abilities. And I will say though, my biggest concern is with the 7 years, because I don't feel there'll be any consistency with those members on that commission. And the commission it's a difficult commission. There's a lot of rules and regulations that oversee the utilities. And I do get a concern about the turnover that would occur within the council members to that commission. I feel like there's a possibility those council members could constantly be running behind the 8 ball because they've been reappointed or they haven't been on as long as a lot of the other members. I don't know what the answer to that is. Unfortunately, it's just the way that this commission is set up. So I'm really on the fence with this. I truly believe we do need representation there, but I think the 7 years causes a significant hurdle for consistency and for learning all of the rules that generate the utility, which is significantly different than what we see on the Common Council. Are we wishing to do anything with this, or would we like to table this until the next meeting? That way, perhaps Nick will have the opportunity at the next council meeting to have his say. Do we?
You do have a
Oh, I'm
motion in a second.
sorry. Can you I somehow missed that. Thank you, Mr. Wagner. And I will have Jessica read it back because I don't remember it.
You have a motion by Alderperson Tompkins and a second by Alderperson Wagner to direct the revision or the drafting of an ordinance to change the Marshfield Utility Commission to include 2 council persons, changing that makeup of the body to 7 members.
It's all coming back to me now. All right, so we do have, yes, Andrew, go ahead.
Just one clarifying question here. So the motion is just to draft the ordinance, nothing further. Is that correct? Right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anything further from anyone? Okay, on that subject. So we will vote on this motion. All those in favor? Opposed? I am opposed.
No.
No. So that's a 3-2. All right, Mr. Wagner, you still have the floor, I believe, on this.
Microphone, please.
Do you want to do anything with the three options on the drafting of the process and procedure? My personal preference was to go with the third option, which would give the city council control over that money.
All right, with that, I will open the floor. Any questions?
It's my
Andrew.
understanding that the Marshfield Utilities also favored option number 3 as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
So,
Natasha?
Ed, the difference between 2 and 3, the council still has control of both of them.
Right.
So what is the difference? It looks like 2 is just clarifying where the money's coming from.
What did I just do with it? There it is.
Rebecca, can I address that?
Absolutely, Nick, go ahead.
Nick.
To your point, Ms. Tompkins, yes, the difference was that the 2 had some verbiage on the source and version 3 does not. And the city attorney was at the meeting where we presented this, and his preference as well was number 3, because the commission has a policy that derives the sources, they make the approval and then send that through to the council. And then the council policy is receiving of those funds. And it's the cleanest to make, you don't want to rewrite stuff in 2 separate spots, especially if there's ever any changes or any tweaks or change or modifications needed in the future.
Thank you, Nick. All right, what's your pleasure? Ed?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll move this along. I'll make a motion that we recommend to the council the adoption of the third option.
All right, so we have a motion from Ed and a second from Andrew. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So that passes 5-0. Ed, did you have one more?
Well, basically,
Or
I don't know if we need to, I guess we need to conform it with, I think the utility would have their policy approving the 25% of the interest on the bonds or the investments and cash of in the surplus fund. So I think we need a motion on that, draft that into the ordinance also.
Natasha?
So I'm seeing here that the way that the policy is written in policy 2, which we're not going to do, but you did say that in that the ATC dividend was 50% net dividend. And I did mention this at the council meeting, and I will mention it again, that I would prefer that we also receive 50% of any other interest that's coming from invested money.
Andrew?
Mr. Cum has his hand raised.
Oh, Nick, go ahead.
Thank you again. So a couple clarifying there. I don't believe this body needs to make any action as it relates to a percentage. That was worked through in the subcommittee, but ultimately the commission policy is what's driving the amount. So again, I don't think there's any need from this body to do any action on that. I'll note that the commission at their last meeting last week did approve the 25% of interest earnings. And to Ms. Tompkins' point, it's actually, just to clarify, on the ATC side, it's 100% of net. It's not 50%, it's 100% of net. And it's 25% of the interest earnings. And there's a lot more here that I'd like to get into explaining why we don't want to get any further into the weeds than this, or money-wise, because I think we're already getting on the tip of our skis as it relates to the Public Service Commission and their oversight of us. So I guess I'll leave it at that at this point.
Anyone else?
We have a motion?
We do not. I don't know that we necessarily need one from.
We already voted on on the.
I believe that, yes. I think from what Nick is saying, they've already run this through the commission and approved the 25%. And I think that's the amount that the subcommittee also kind of settled on, so.
That's correct.
Andrew,
Just for clarification, is that 25%, is that amount dictated by the commission then? Or who sets that? Like if they were to raise it or lower it, who would be doing the raising and lowering?
The commission sets it.
Thank you.
And is that by state statute or is that just by city code? Or city policy?
Local option.
I think there's a combination of what that is, and I think that's what Nick was trying to allude to. There's restraints in place that they have to follow through the public commission, or the public, what is that, PCO? I don't even know what those actually stand for.
Public
PS,
Service Corp.
what is it?
Public Service Commission.
There you go, PSO. And what, is there anything further, Nick, you want to explain about that, or?
Well, no, I mean, Public Service Commission is who regulates us. And I think the big thing here, you got to take from the 30,000 foot is that they regulate us and they are concerned about ratepayers paying dollars to support utility interests. They do not want to see tax utility dollars being used for tax purposes. There's a distinguishing factor there. And there's cases, we went through this in the subcommittee where there were municipalities that were taking money out of the utility, and the Public Service Commission requiring or requesting that the municipality actually pay the utility back those funds. And based on where we're at right now, there's nearly 600 electric and water utilities in the state. There are only 8 of them that are providing more than $100,000 to their municipality. And with what's been passed and what we're looking at here for this year, we're going to be the highest one by far. With we're going to be over 400,000, with the next one being under 300,000. And if we get much further out in front, the PSC might start asking some questions on why there's being all these funds transferred and why we're so much different than everybody else in the state. And I think that's a concern that we have to be conscious of as we think about this. In the past, the dollars all went to economic development. I think there's an easy argument, but now, obviously, with all those funds coming to your discretion, we get too far out in front, the PSC could come back and say, no, you guys can't transfer any more funds. So we just have to be smart about this.
Ed, go ahead.
I thank Mr. Cohn for his input. However, I do say that if you read the details of those cases, not in every case, even though the Public Service Commission had suggested that one community pay the money back, they didn't enforce it. And why not? Because that community was running through some very hard budgeting times too. And which means that the Public Service Corporation understands and knows that the utility is owned by that municipality. Then the other point about the Moody's rating being good because of the utility, because if we ever got in trouble, let's say, for instance, the Marshfield Clinic wins its case and we have to cough up $3.2 million to pay back taxes to them, where do you think we're going to get the money? Okay, I'm done.
Well, I think there's...
Go ahead, Nick.
I'll bite my tongue on this one.
Okay. Okay, so getting back to the agenda. Are we doing anything further, or are we done with this topic? All right, I think we're going to move on. 14, suggested items for future agendas. Seeing none. 15, adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes Chapter 19.851C, considering employment promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, most specific to the promotion of the civil engineer 1 to civil engineer 2 and related pay adjustments. I have a motion.
Motion to go into closed session.
A motion by Ed, second by Andrew. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, we
I'm going to
will
roll
be
call for closed session. Rigel?
Yes.
Tompkins? Varsho? Wagner?
Yes.
Barrows?
Yes.